Welcome to Tell Me More, the Allsteel podcast where design meets innovation and we explore the limitless potential of workspaces. In this exclusive series, we're peeling back the layers of workplace design. From the psychology of colors to the future of hybrid work, join us as we open doors to conversations with industry leaders, architects, and designers who redefine the modern workplace. This is Tell Me More, brought to you by Allsteel, because when it comes to designing the future, there's always more to discover. Welcome to Doing More series. My name is Chelsea Compton. I'm a member of the Allsteel team, and joining me today is Stephen Kelley. Stephen, how are you?
I'm great. How are you this morning, Chelsea?
I'm good. We're so happy that you're joining us. To kick us off, would you briefly introduce yourself to those
Sure.
tuning in? Where are you from? Share a little bit about your career and what it is that you do.
Happy to. So I am originally from upstate New York, so not too far away from here. I'm in New York City. Uh,
Okay.
the office is in Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, and that was sort of very intentional when we opened the studio because it's kind of, old New York. It's where the city started, and we really, even with interiors projects, like to sort of have a sense of history, a sense of context. And so our studio naturally wanted to be in a place that sort of reflected that too. And then I live in Brooklyn, like most of our studio. But I originally, like I said, I'm from upstate New York, but I went to undergraduate in Boston and then graduate school in Philadelphia. And then after that, moved out to San Francisco, where I actually worked with the firm that kind of evolved into WRNS. And so, I mentioned the people talk about their schools and, so forth, and, whether it's prestige or it's a specific kind of mindset or whatever. I wasn't that cunning with it, but I had a really nice balance because Northeastern was just kind of starting out with architecture when I started, and they had a program that was in a way kind of like pre-law or pre-med. It was pre-architecture, so it wasn't a professional degree. But I think that that was actually a sort of really good thing for me because it was um, really kind of art oriented. I have a bachelor's of science in art with a concentration in architecture, and so it gave us the chance to kind of do architectural projects, but then make paintings or do product design or whatever, sculpture. And, I think that is something that I have kind of treasured over the years. And I think it sort of really does change my approach to interiors in terms of product, furniture, finishes and things like that. So I did that. Then I went to the University of Pennsylvania for my graduate program, which was, Ben Franklin started it. It's like old school MArch. And, that was great. But I'm glad I had the other experience first because I think I had a much better kind of approach to things. But I had an older sister with a free room for me to stay in San Francisco. So I moved out there with .com. And, it was pretty exciting. It was a sort of a lot of energy, a lot of new companies starting, a lot of new approaches to creative things, whether they were sort of internets or new websites and things like that. But worked at a firm called Gordon Chong. And Gordon Chong eventually, as I mentioned, evolved into WRNS. So then, sorry, this is really long-winded, but it all sets everything up.
Good.
Basically, I loved being part of that world, and I loved working at Gordon Chong and the folks that I worked with. But then 9/11 happened. That same sister who was out there had actually moved to New York about a month before, in offices in the Trade Center, and lost about 75 people that reported to her. So it was pretty rough.
Wow.
She was much older than she is much older than I am. She's gonna hate that if she sees this. But she was a managing director, and had been with that company for a long time, and so
Yeah, I mean, that
it
changes
was
you.
it was awful. And again, we didn't know if it was just something that was going to become normal. I didn't want to necessarily be a 5-hour flight from my family
Hmm.
and a lot of my friends. And, my mother was older at that point. And so I made the decision to leave San Francisco as well. And so was living in New York by February of 2002.
Okay.
And so, not the best time to find a job in New York, but I managed and worked for a number of different firms. architecture and interiors. So I worked at um, a small office that's now a pretty big office, A plus I, and working on Puff Daddy's office, and then shifted over to Handel, which was working on both the Trade Center Memorial, which was nice to I touched it a little bit, and then there was a point where New York was trying to get the Olympics for 2012, so I ended up working on an ice rink and pool in Flushing Meadows. It was supposed to be the water polo venue, but
Oh,
they built it.
oh
So
wow.
kind of fun experiences, and so
Yeah.
um, and then worked on a couple of residential towers, and both kind of as a PA in architecture, but also on the interiors. And so I think, I mentioned the Northeastern experience and kind of working in a bunch of different places and also working on a bunch of different types of creative things. I think that I've very much had this attitude that there's a kind of a sort of mixing of these disciplines, and I've never seen a sort of strong kind of lines between interiors and architecture. To me, it's got to all be about strong ideas and rigor, and we can touch on obviously sustainability and equity and material science and stuff, but I don't make that sort of big distinction. I think that that's kind of reflected in my career up to this point. Um, so worked on the sort of big stuff, and then I think, and I would definitely sort of try to impress this on any young designers in particular that are watching this. You know, I think our careers should be kind of like pendulums, where if you feel like you're getting too designy and not really understanding how things are put together or what the sort of implications of a material is or something, lean into that. you know, for me, it was like working on projects. I love doing the creative stuff, but I was like, I don't really understand all the codes and things like that. So I went and got a part-time job with an expediter, and had my own little studio and was doing sort of restaurants and apartments. And then eventually
Cool.
partnered in on a restaurant and was cooking hamburgers and doing TV stuff with it. And, it's all creative and it's all kind of, it sort of is like filling a library or a bank for yourself because you never know when this stuff is going to come back. So fast forward a little bit to more of the reason that I kind of interface a lot with Allsteel is that about 9 years ago, one of the partners from WRNS, Brian Childs, was in town. We had dinner. I kept in touch with all the folks out there. Really loved working with them, but knew my life was here. And he just said, what if we did New York? And I was like, I'm in. Didn't
You were
take a
in.
breath. I was like, because I had been watching the work they were doing, and I think sort of core values around sustainability and equity and all these different things were things that weren't getting talked about as much in New York yet. I think they are now. So that was really appealing to me, and also getting to work with the same folks again.
Right.
They had started to really grow in the Bay Area, and we're working with a lot of clients, particularly on the kind of interiors and some core and shell buildings for tech companies. That these companies were all saying, "Why aren't you a national firm? Why aren't you in New York, or why aren't you in Chicago, or why aren't you sort of expanding so that you can handle projects everywhere?" And it
Hmm.
also coincided with Brian teaching at Northeastern, ironically. So he was flying to the East Coast fairly often. So there were all these kind of things pointing to an East Coast office. And so luckily there was also another guy who had worked at WRNS who had moved back to New York, John McGill. So the two of us basically sort of met. We got along and then started sitting in a little glass box at WeWork for by ourselves
I love
initially.
it.
Yeah, it was fun,
I
and
love it.
re-engaging with people after it had been 15 years. So, yeah, it was great. And so I think combining talents of us sort of knowing the market here, and then what the sort of genuine values of WRNS were, made a lot of sense.
That does make sense. So just to kind of back up a little bit,
Sure.
you mentioned that I mean, you kind of seem like a man of many talents. You mentioned that when you were in school, dabbled in a lot of different interests. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, from where you started, you just explained your entire story, from where you started to where you are now. What was it that inspired you to join this industry? I mean, really, what was it that motivated
Sure.
you to pursue this kind of work?
It actually kind of takes me to my favorite quote. A manager at a retail kind of Home Depot type store I used to work at said to me when he was trying to change me, move me to a different department. change is as good as a rest. And I think that, particularly when you're young, looking ahead and saying, okay, I'm going to do the same thing for 50 years. No. But, when you sort of start to kind of build skills or realize what things you're kind of latently interested in, start to kind of test them in a way. Okay, how does, my interest in color work here? Or, you know, how can you kind of transfer it to different types of things and different types of problems and questions? And, I think fundamentally our field is about sort of creative problem solving.
Right.
With a sort of eye towards aesthetics and stuff. So I've always been drawn to the sort of balance of science and art in architecture and interiors and design. But, again, like I was saying earlier, you have to lean different ways at different times. So I liked that there was a kind of built-in structure where I could sort of keep learning. And that's actually another thing, when you work on different types of projects, you learn about a lot of different industries. And it's exciting and it's fun. And so I think that being able to kind of affect change, whether it's sort of evolving, the way a company works in a workplace, or, when I was a kid, I used to draw strip malls, and then I would have the restaurant go out of business, and then moving up, draw in a Toys R Us or something. I was 12, but I think that idea of renovating and change and giving sort of new life to a space or to an object, it's all the same sort of motivation. It's the sort of, I think that buildings certainly in New York, I mean, I guess everywhere, but there's such a sort of history and an ethos to the place. And I think that buildings kind of have some souls. And I think we'll probably get to a sort of project we just finished that it was an older building that everybody kind of knew, but it's got a new life. And that was really fun to be part of. So that kind of change stuff is really enticing.
Yeah. And so it sounds like, what's really interested you is being a part of change. And it sounds like you've
Yep.
had a lot of experience in that. Curious, how long have you been in the industry?
I tallied that up actually, and it's kind of about 35 years young. But I'm counting the co-op stuff at Northeastern because that was really valuable. I worked at corporate firms, but I also worked at little tiny, it was a husband and wife design firm on Beacon Hill, learning traditional moldings. And I still refer to that stuff. And so, if you starting at 19, I had a birthday recently, so I just turned 54. And
happy belated birthday.
Thank you. It flies.
As you blink and
it flies. And I'll tell all you folks out there, 30s and 40s go really fast. But it also, you have enough behind you that you start to kind of really feel confident and you can enjoy the process a little bit more and enjoy life more, I think.
Yeah, I think...
I'm going to work till I'm 100, so...
Okay, so really quick then. So you've been in the industry for over 30 years. So throughout that time, and you kind of touched on this, but what would you say, really inspires your design aesthetic? Is it specific themes? Is it cultures? Is it movements that influence your work?
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
I was actually just talking to somebody in the studio this morning about a specific product. We're doing a really great project in Palm Springs right now for a new community college.
Fun.
And there's an issue with the material. And it's, I was like, oh, I think I actually used that material. It was a very specific material. And I was like, I used that years ago when I did an apartment building on the Upper West Side. And so I, Googled and pulled up some of the pictures of it. And she's like, wow, I could tell that you designed that.
Oh, how cool.
There's, it's obviously, it's 15 years ago, but there's moves in there that I see those moves. And, so to me, I think it's, my interest, whether it was sort of super conscious in the beginning or more conscious now, is to create character and create spaces. And, it kind of ties into the change thing of transforming but also kind of giving it a sort of soul and a texture, and also kind of, leaning towards the future. I think in a weird way, time is always sort of something I think about. I think that we have to look backwards and not in an overly nostalgic way to kind of create a common ground for people to understand something. Okay, those are wood panels. That kind of feels like this or something else I've seen. But I also think that, part of what we need to do is look forward and be optimistic and think about the future and like really kind of give it, a sort of positive energy too. But so kind of looking forward and back at the same time. And I think I've always kind of done that. Try to sort of, either give it a sort of interesting kind of color story, a proportion, or something that like is definitely not traditional and
Okay.
sort of
Yeah.
now or of forward.
This is a perfect parallel, though, into my next question because my
Sure.
next question was going to be, how do you enjoy spending time outside of work?
Hmm.
But after listening to what you said, I mean, how do you use your love for design and architecture outside of just the projects that you're working on? How do you like spending your time?
I'm glad you asked that because I doing something very kind of specifically right now with that. I think that to me you kind of live and breathe this in a
Yeah.
way, and so it's not like I turn it all off and then I go, and I bake bread. It's there's always sort of a create something creative, but also with technology, we've had our smartphones for so many years now. Uh, I'm always taking photos. And I know that's a kind of cliche thing, but what I started doing is kind of mining them a little bit. And so, um, I've got 15 years of digital images. And so last winter, I kind of sat down for a couple of days, literally, and organized them on the cloud, or at least just kind of rough categories, right? And so this year, what I'm doing is kind of going through them, and I'm doing a sort of collage a day, and I'm just drawing images from all over the place, travel, even I love infrastructure and like in the subway, kind of what you call almost like unintentional design, just the colors, the layering of like scraped paint and different sort of old signs and things like that. And so to me, there's a reason I took that picture, even if it was 10 or 12 years ago. And so now I'm kind of going back into those and kind of really quick, kind of creating something new from it. So again, it's kind of the old and the new. And,
Yeah,
and
that's
to
good.
me, and I've set it up for a year. I've got 365 images set up. I'm posting them on Instagram.
Wow.
And so basically, to me, I want to step back after that and see, okay, what are these kind of through lines? There
Hmm.
are things that I've definitely been drawn to over the years, and there are design tendencies that are, apparent in my work. But I also love kind of doing a deep dive into a project in terms of whether it's the history of the company or the space or whatever. And so, I think that doesn't necessarily, I genuinely enjoy doing it, I guess, is my point. I also have a little puppy who's awesome and, like to bake and travel and all that stuff. But everything is usually creative and usually about sort of looking.
Yeah, you're a true artist. That's what it
I think
is.
so. I think
Yeah, I
so.
think you are. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome. So I want to kind of talk about your community too. So when you think about architecture and design in your community,
Mhm.
what type of opportunities inspire you? Is there anything that you've contributed to or maybe hope to contribute to in the future?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's important, particularly in New York. The cities are different around the country, having worked
Mhm.
in a lot of them. But I think the design community is really coherent here and cohesive. And so I've been part of IIDA. I was chair of the Pioneers Committee, which was really sort of meant to kind of look at the edges of interior design, what things kind of inform it, maybe cutting edge technology or history. We had the Bowery Boys on from their podcast. We had on a panel, we had different AI creators and things like that. But so I've been involved with that. WRNS has a Studio WRNS, which I've been involved in a little bit, which is sort of it's a it's both a scholarship program and a kind of tutoring mentoring program for inner city schools, students in high schools, and mostly in Oakland and here. And it's a small group, but it basically to kind of introduce the world of architecture and design and potentially fund college scholarships.
Wow.
So I think mentoring, is something that I always benefited from, and so I try to sort of do that as much as I can. I tend to sit on a lot of juries at design schools and have a lot of friends that teach, and to me, that's a big part of things. And then, uh, recently been sort of exposed to the world of nursing homes and elder care and senior living. My mother just passed and was in a nursing home, and
I'm
so
sorry to hear that.
thank you. Uh, I got exposed to that, and I think that that's a world that we're in trouble with in design, and so I think that we have a huge crisis coming, and I also think that it's sort of naive the way it's approached now. Not generally, I mean, there's good examples, but to think that everybody's going to sort of get to a certain age and want to kind of not care about sustainability or fresh air and light and the things that they valued when they could take care of themselves completely. And so I'm looking at sort of joining the AIA Committee on Aging and also getting involved with more senior sort of oriented things.
That's fascinating. I've not heard a lot about, that aspect in this industry thus far. So,
Well, it
uh,
kind of struck me, sitting there once, a few years ago, and you get to know all the folks that work there,
yeah,
and they taking care of your mom, and there were, I don't know if you call them orderlies or what, helpers, that
yeah,
are young kids, probably just out of high school, and even they're talking about the silver wave of the baby boomers, and they're like, there's no places. And I've said this before to people too. Like, it was shocking to me that when we needed to find a bed for my mother in Syracuse, not a tiny city, but not a huge city,
yeah.
there were 15 facilities, and this is a few years ago.
Hmm.
There was one bed,
You're kidding.
one in the whole city,
Wow.
and it's like $14,000 a month. So it's not. Luckily, we had insurance and stuff, but like, this is gonna explode.
So this is
When
a project you're really excited about. I mean, it
Yeah, I
seems
don't
like,
know what form it's going to take. I've been doing some
yeah,
research in terms of there. I know there are sort of people that invest in this world. I know that there are companies that make products for this world. I think that there, H&I probably has products that can be adapted to this world. But I think that, one of my things is, I've got a lot of experience in workplace and residential and all these sort of
yeah.
adjacent fields. This is all transferable. And so that's kind of one thing that I've been kind of looking into, trying to figure out the right way to do it. So
That's really exciting. I look forward to kind of keeping up on your projects when it comes to that.
well, I hope that I have some good things to show. I'm going to try.
Yeah. And you touched on this, when we were just briefly talking about this, but you touched on mentoring.
Yeah.
And I'd love to kind of complete this interview with something that maybe we could give back to others. I think that you've had a lot of experience in, your career. And I think when we're thinking about individuals coming up in the industry, are there any lessons that you've learned throughout your career that you wish someone would have shared with you earlier?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is, and I remember sort of realizing this earlier. Actually, my sister that I mentioned earlier, who's quite a bit older and was really established. I remember one thing she said was, "Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't ever
I
sort of
love
get self-conscious." But I think, if I think kind of overall, I think that we get into this sort of tendency. It's a hard profession. It really is, and it's a lot of work, especially when you're younger. Don't get discouraged and don't default. Don't just do what you did on another project or what you see somebody else doing. I think that all of these projects, doesn't matter what the sort of budget is or how big it is or what type it is, deserve their kind of their own ideas. That like I keep kind of touching on. I think not to sound new agey or something, but they're spaces do get a soul. And I think that, furniture, all these sort of decisions that we make, I think they need to be really sort of thoughtful. And so it's always kind of take a step back, take a breath, say, what is this project about? What is the idea? Every project deserves an idea. But this also ties in with sustainability. We just
that.
finished the renovation of what was Lord and Taylor department store into Amazon headquarters. Um, and we respected the building. There's character and essence of the old building in the new. And I think that having that sort of character and that thoughtfulness in the decisions and kind of, for lack of a better term, treating like the office or the workplace as a kind of heirloom quality project, it's not going to get replaced in 5 years. It's not a fast fashion thing where suddenly, oh, that looks very 2017. It's time to change it. Our hope is with our work that projects stay built for a long time. People layer into them, but they don't throw stuff out. And so there's a carbon story there, there's a sustainability story there, but it's the right way to do things too. So
Yeah. So really the advice you're giving is really understand the intention of the project or space you're working on and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Exactly.
Love it. That's great advice.
I know it sounds
Um,
general, but it's something that gets lost sometimes.
no, I think especially when you're young, like you mentioned, I think sometimes you walk in a room and there's this saying that, you fake it till you make it. But I think it's okay to ask questions. I think it shows that you're
There's no
curious.
reason to fake it. Yeah.
Right. Right. So I love that. I think that's very supportive, and helpful. But
Good.
even this has been lovely. Is there anything else
Likewise.
as we're wrapping up that you would love to share? Maybe an exciting project that you're working on, or is there, a way that our listeners can follow or connect with you?
Sure. I just sort of touched on it, but we just finished this project for Amazon in New York, which is taking the old Lord and Taylor department store. It's on our website, WRNSstudio.com. Uh, and we actually reused some artifacts from the original building. It's about a 100-year-old building. It was a
Oh,
very,
cool.
very famous department store. Wood panels and tiles and brass sort of castings and stuff, and in a very kind of modern way. So that was really exciting.
It is.
And then I mentioned the project in uh, Palm Springs.
Mm-hmm.
It's the community college, and so that's pretty exciting. But I think, WRNS Studio, if anybody wants to follow me on Instagram, it's Kelley Vision, like television. That's
Love it.
Kelley. And then I've got sort of links on there to this art project that I was talking about, kind of revisiting images and reacting. So, yeah,
Great. Great. Well, thank
this
you
was
so much.
fun.
This was fun. I really appreciate you spending time with me and
My
sharing
pleasure.
your insights for our Doing More series. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Take care.
Take care.
And that brings us to the end of another fascinating episode of Tell Me More. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of design and innovation. If you're hungry for more insights and stories, make sure to subscribe to Tell Me More on your preferred podcast platform. As we sign off, remember that the conversation doesn't end here. Connect with us on social media at Allsteel and share your thoughts, questions, or even your favorite moments from the podcast. We love hearing from our engaged and curious audience. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll continue exploring the design to do more philosophy. Until then, thanks for listening.